Hi guys, so today I'm with Nissan and I'm checking out the Formula E racing. This is Nissan, these are their cars. What is Formula E? Well, it's like Formula 1 but with electric cars. So today we're going to find out what makes them work, how do they work, how does Formula E work. Also, I'm going to see, is it exciting? What is it like to see Formula E in action? Let's go talk to these guys first.
Welcome to the Nissan Formula E garage. My name's Martin. I'm going to talk to you a bit about what we can see here, a bit about the Generation 2 to 3 changes on the Formula E cars. First, a bit about why Nissan and its partners choose to race in Formula E. The way Formula E works is we have stock parts, we have control parts that all of the teams, all 22 cars, all 11 teams have to use. The same bodywork, so all the aerodynamics are fixed. The same carbon fibre chassis, the front suspension and the front powertrain, which is new for this year, front brakes, dampers, all of those parts are stock parts. And what it's designed to do is to make the manufacturers concentrate on the powertrain, so the bit of the car that directly links to the road car program. So at the back of the car, behind the battery, which is also a stock part, so there's no battery wars in Formula E. Behind the battery we have the powertrain, which is the inverter, the MGU, which is the motor generation unit, which is the electric motor that propels the car and also regens under braking. And then the gearbox and the rear suspension is also part of that powertrain. So the bit that makes our two Nissan Formula E's the Nissan is the back part of the car, which is why that's the sort of sensitive area, as well as the steering wheel. But I have got another steering wheel to show you, so a previous gen one, so we can show you that. So yeah, tyres, battery, chassis, bodywork, all completely fixed, which is why apart from the liveries, you see our lovely cherry blossom livery this year, which is to signify the blooming of a new era for Nissan. So difficult couple of seasons at the end of Generation 2, in season 7 and 8, but this was to signify the purchase of the team. So now the team is wholly owned by Nissan, so it's a full factory team. The new Generation 3 car and 2 new drivers for this season, so hence the cherry blossom to signify that new era. Other things that have changed, we started 5 years ago at the beginning of Generation 2, so the beginning of season 5, and we came into Formula E with what we refer to as a road to track strategy. So Nissan used experience in creating electric vehicles and electric powertrains for those electric vehicles to enable us to build the ones for the race car. So with over 500,000 Nissan Leaf sold in the world, and obviously the Area at advanced stage of development when we first came in, we had quite a bit to bring to the party. But now we've been racing in Formula E for 4 full seasons and now nearly at the end of our 5th season. There's a lot of learnings from the very complex systems that make these cars run. So we have brake-by-wire, so the driver's foot is not actually hydraulically connected to the brakes anymore, it's all controlled by computers. The complex regeneration system, so both the front axle and the rear axle now in Generation 3. So we now have 250 kilowatts from the front and 350 from the rear, so 600 kilowatts of regen into the corner. So we use the electric motors to slow the car down rather than the brakes, to the point where we don't even use the rear brakes. We don't even, they're there purely for emergency, so we don't even use them. We're relying that heavily on the regen. And in fact, we start the race, albeit with a full charge of battery, with only 60% of the energy needed to complete the race. So all the teams have deliberately small batteries to make it harder for the manufacturers, and we have to regenerate as we go. So we actually create 40% of the energy to complete the race, we create during the race. So they're incredibly efficient cars. So we came in with this road to track strategy, but now we've learned a lot. We've now flipped that over, and we've got teams, we've got engineers embedded in the race team now who are on the road car program. So we're taking those learnings and that tech and transferring it over to the road cars to make Nissan's future EVs more efficient and more exciting. Cars themselves have got smaller and lighter. Obviously going smaller in battery is able just to go quite a bit lighter. But we've added the powertrain to the front this year, so they've netted out 50 kilos lighter, but we've gone 100 kilowatts more power on the rear. So we've gone from 250 to 350, which is around 470 horsepower. So now they're seriously quick cars. Every evolution of Formula E, they get faster and faster. And the biggest change clearly is adding that extra powertrain and enabling us to regen even further. So once we've built the powertrain, we've made that as efficient as possible. We add the Shell e-fluid, so we have a partnership with Shell who work on specialist e-fluids for our powertrain that are developed specifically for electric vehicles, and we have a partnership with the high performance version of that in our powertrain there. Then it's all down to the software. So you'll see how the garage is laid out there. We have the umbilicals going up to the gantry, and all the data goes that way into the engineering room, which is the other side of that wall, where the engineers sit and constantly work on the software. So every single time that car comes back into the pits, we download the data, they sit with the engineer, they work out how they can be more efficient or make it more comfortable for the driver, and they're constantly tweaking the software so it's slightly better every single session, which is why it's so important for Nissan to be in Formula E, because they're doing a huge amount of R&D but in a really compressed time scale. So it's much more efficient actually than traditional R&D because of that competitive element puts the pressure on.
When you're doing these assessments on how much energy is being used, is the driver involved in that? Does the driver have any input into that, or is that entirely done from here?
Oh no, 100%. So where Formula E differs to traditional motorsport is we don't have telemetry, so we don't have live data being back to the engineers, and the reason for that is we've got a restricted number of personnel who are allowed to travel to the races, both from a budget point of view but also from an environmental perspective. We fly around 25 people around the world, which is kind of a quarter to a third the amount of a team in other championships, right? But in order to stop the bigger manufacturers filling massive control rooms with engineers who are crunching the software and working on that back at the factories, they restrict the data and they have to keep it local, so we can't beam it all over the world basically. But yeah, the drivers then, therefore, because there's no telemetry, have to read the information from the dash using the radio back to the engineers. So it's constantly reporting back battery state of charge, battery temperature, tyre and brake temperatures. All of that information is fed back, usually in code. It's actually quite clever. At the end of every lap, a code will pop up on the dashboard which the driver can relay back. So the driver will say Foxtrot 108 Bravo. They decode that at the engineer's station here, and that will give them a list of figures which they can then work out, right, well, we're 25% into the race and our state of charge is at X, so therefore we're in a good position or not, and then they'll then report to the driver, save or stay as you are, or you can overconsume for a couple of laps to build a gap if you want to. So they're constantly working two-way during the session, and then after each session the drivers go and they sit next to their engineers in a massive bank of engineers. We've actually got more engineers working on software than we've got mechanics working on spanners. Such is the importance of tweaking that software, and they'll work out how they can make it more efficient, a bit more comfortable for the driver. During the session though, they can also make lots of changes. So this is the scenario switch. So here they load up, well, exactly what it says on the tin really, a bunch of scenarios. So different power settings, different powertrain settings, different settings that make the car behave in different ways, so they can affect how the car rotates when you go into the corner by adjusting how quickly the brake releases, for example, front and rear. So they can be quite clever. So they put these scenario settings in there. So scenario 2 is literally going out and warming up the brakes and tyres. Then they'll typically go to scenario 6 and 7 during practice, scenario 10 during qualifying, so the out and out as fast as it can go option for that final lap of qualifying. So they'll have a bunch of scenarios there. Or if there's a specific issue and they want the driver to make a specific change to the powertrain in a certain area, and all of this stuff is top secret and all coded, so that if the other teams did manage to get a picture of it, that it doesn't actually mean a great deal. Obviously the information on the screen would be. And they can, using code to go back to the drivers on the radio, mainly because it's open source in Formula E. The radio, you can listen to it on the app if you wanted to, so everyone can hear it, so they do everything in code. So they say to the driver, Sarah +2 confirm, which doesn't mean anything to anyone. Switch to Sarah, 2 clicks on here, confirm. So these aren't used for gears, or we don't have gears in Formula E. This is actually for controlling the onboard computer. So this is like left and right arrow key, and this is like enter, basically. So this activates a setting. So each position has, there's 10 positions, and each position has 20 options. So there's 600 options on the wheel there. Now the driver doesn't have to know them all, because of course the engineers will know most of it and be able to talk
But that's still a lot of work that the driver is doing, in addition to driving flat out.
When you consider they're driving flat out on relatively hard tyres, 350 kilowatts, so 470 horsepower, when the car only weighs 850, including the driver. So half that of a Nissan Leaf, but a lot more power. The car's sliding around on the tyres because they're quite hard. You've got concrete walls, it's dusty, and you've got 21 other drivers. You've got beeps in your ear telling you when to lift and coast. You've got your engineer then saying, oh, make a change to the powertrain, work the computer systems, and then the driver's having to do all that and do this.
Wow.
So it just shows that these guys operate on a completely different level to us mere mortals.
They've also got 2 types of braking, haven't they? Because they have to use the regen buttons as well as the foot brake, right?
Yes, so we have brake by wire actually. So when the driver presses the brake pedal, it's just moving a potentiometer, and in fact they have to set it up to give the feel of an actual brake pedal, but actually it's not actually a hydraulic brake system on the driver's foot. The computer decides the ratio of friction braking versus regenerative braking, and of course now the added metric this year of regenerative braking at the front and the rear, or a mixture of both. So they're constantly working on that, so they can adjust regen strength as they are going around, and nice big chunky buttons, because obviously don't forget they're wearing gloves. So they can adjust regen strength and also brake balance and brake bite here. So brake balance being the ratio front to rear, not friction braking, braking as a whole, so we're talking about friction and regenerative. Remembering there are no rear brakes, so we don't have the option to friction brake on the rear. The rear brakes you might spy are emergency brakes, so they're only there if we have a complete shutdown. Obviously with the brake-by-wire system, you don't have that kind of hydraulic backup, so there's the emergency brakes. If the system shuts down, that defaults to on, so it stops the car if we have a complete failure in the system. So brake balance, and then brake bite, which is where when the driver comes off the brake pedal, normally with a traditional hydraulic system you come off the brakes release. With this they can choose the speed at which the brake releases, so you can effectively tune in trail braking where the braking releases, and also you can release at different rates front and rear, so you can use the brakes to turn the car as well. So it's all very clever.
Enable the regen with these buttons on there.
Yep, so that's if you're using specifically just using the brakes and rely, and it's generally down to each driver and their preferences. So the drivers also have the option to use the regen paddles, and these are nice because they're linear, so a little bit of regen or full regen, it's all done like on the fingertips here with a little finger. And some drivers also like to lift and coast with this one, so they actually completely disconnect the powertrain and then coast to the last part of the straight. All drivers lift and coast, but you can actually set this one so that it will actually disconnect to make it that bit more efficient. So what you'll see in the race is, depending on where your energy levels are, if you're at a higher energy level than those around you, you can lift and coast less, so therefore you can make a move. So if you're lifting and coasting aggressively, then you need to lift off sort of 3/4 of the way down the straight, because that's the most efficient way. You're not trying to push the car through the air at high speed, which creates drag, which then uses more battery. So it's all about that balance between lap time and managing the energy. Have a little go on that. Don't drop it. 7,000 euros.
Basically bloody complicated. So is this it's your motor, is it?
Yep, so the powertrain at the back.
By any other teams as well?
Well, so we're also, we have a customer team in McLaren.
Right.
So all the manufacturers are obliged to provide a powertrain, make it available if people ask. So you know, Porsche do it, DS, everyone supplies themselves and another customer team. So there's actually 4 Nissan powertrains on the grid this weekend.
And those are?
Jake Hughes and Rene Rast in the McLaren,
Yeah.
and then Norman Nato and Sasha Fenestraz in the factory cars.
Oh, okay, 4 cars, right, not 4 teams.
So in terms of the fact that you said you can program the brakes and stuff like that, so for a qualifying lap, how much of that would be pre-programmed?
They'll work on different strategies before. They'll pre-program it into the scenario. So in free practice then, Sasha was saying he felt the steering was quite dead in the middle of the corner, and they said, okay, switch from scenario 6 to scenario 7, and that's a different setting, and it makes it a bit better for him.
Brown car guy.
So guys, as you can see, the race has started. It's the final race of the year. Unfortunately, it's chucking it down with rain. So it's under the safety car. You can see the cars coming up behind me there. Unfortunately, I can't actually show you all of this race because I don't want to be in contravention of copyright restrictions on broadcast of this race. But you'll be able to see it online, and of course this race will have happened by the time you actually see this video. But there's a lot of water. They're doing laps under the safety car at the moment. It'll be interesting to see how they get on. Now keep in mind, these cars are actually all-wheel drive because they've got a motor on the front, motor on the back. And they can accelerate to 60 miles per hour in 2.8 seconds, and they can reach 200 miles per hour. They weigh about 840 kilograms. And the incredible thing is that, as we heard earlier, they generate 40% of their energy during the race. So they only start about 60% of the energy required to actually complete the race. So it's quite extraordinary how these things run. Now, I think we've seen about 3 or 4 laps now are under safety car. So I don't know if they're going to release them or not. It's interesting, isn't it? Because indoors it's dry, because half of this track is indoors and half of it is outdoors. So indoors is dry, but out here it's completely chucking it down. So it'll be interesting to see if at some point they release it. Anyway, the point is today for me to have a look and watch the race, see what it's like, and I'll report back to you later on my own thoughts about Formula E. Well, so there you go. There's our experience of seeing Formula E in action. And it's been quite an extraordinary day, actually. 3 false starts because of the weather, and they finally started to go on the 3rd attempt. They started to go ahead. It took a while. They were doing sweeping and stuff like that to try and clear the water off the track. They went ahead. They had already done sort of 6 laps under safety car. So then they went ahead, and now they're completing the race now. So what's the takeaway from today? Well, extraordinary, absolutely incredible amount of time, effort, energy goes into this, not just in terms of the team, but also in terms of how the car is put together, but also, and I think most of all, in terms of what the drivers have to do. It's quite extraordinary when you think about all of the effort that the drivers having to do in terms of, hey, driving the car, concentrate on the race, racecraft, but actually pretty much operating a computer as well, and thinking on the go how to maximize the energy that they have, and how to get enough energy. It's quite an extraordinary thing. In terms of what is it like as a spectator? Well, it is fascinating. What you get is this incredible whooshing noise. You get this incredible whining noise. You can hear the tires at work. So especially in that outdoor section where the chicane was, you can hear the tires at work. You can also hear the body at work, because as it hits the rumble strips and the corner rumble strip, you can hear the body flex, you can hear the bump thump, you can hear the tires on the tarmac. So there's a lot of sound and stuff, the sensation, I suppose, that you are getting. And from the driver's point of view, it must be an incredible workout. But I gotta say that you do miss the engine noise. You really, really do. Because, the first time I ever saw a Formula 1 car in action, sorry, just got interrupted there. But the first time I saw a Formula 1 car in action years and years ago, I think that was way back at Silverstone. I went for a test session, I think, just to have a look, and I think it must have been V10s back at that time. And the way that the sound of those engines reverberated through you as an F1 car went past. And I've seen a top fueler, for example. The first time I saw that was at Santa Pod, and that left an imprint. And so the first time that took off, off, it left an imprint. You know, the whole sound energy just reverberated through your being and it left an imprint, but it's incredible. So that aspect of it you simply do miss, I've got to be honest. Is there an argument for putting a more of an artificial sound in? Maybe, perhaps, but on the other, I don't know if it would help. It might help for a spectator, but on the other hand, it's just visually it is spectacular to see these things, to see how quick they are, and to see what they can achieve. But it's been a great day out, and I might even come back next year. Let's see. Anyway, let me know what you think of Formula E racing.
Brown car guy.
Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please hit the like button and share this video as well if you can. And while you're at it, check out these guys who also sponsor my content. I am deeply grateful to them because it helps me to buy new equipment, put fuel in the cars, and yes, buy a cup of coffee. You can do the same. Just go here or right here on YouTube. Just hit these three little dots down here and click on thanks. Make sure you're signed in first. My content is free, but this is how you can help me keep it that way. I may even send you a gift. Oh, by the way, watch this next.